Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking something pretty incredible. We are going to synthesize Eastern and Western economic philosophy, and we're doing it through the cyclic lens of Daesoon thought, diving into some absolutely fascinating prior research along the way. Now, I know economics usually feels like this dry, rigid science of numbers and charts, but this research, it reimagines the whole thing. We're going to see how deep-rooted religious concepts, ancient ideas of circulation, and human ethics are actually the hidden bedrock of the entire global economy. It's a wild ride, so let's just dive right in.
We have to start by grounding this whole explainer in one core Daesoon concept. Quote, money is a thing created and used through the principle of circulation. Really think about that for a second. In our modern capitalist mindset, we usually treat money as this thing to just accumulate, right? To hoard or extract. But this single idea completely flips our modern understanding of wealth on its head. It argues that money's very existence, its fundamental literal purpose, is to circulate. If it stops moving, if it just pools up and stagnates somewhere, it completely loses its true function.
To see how this all works, we're going to hit four main areas today: the Eastern origins of the Western economy, Daesoon economic ethics, the link between circularity and religion, and finally, synthesizing all of this into a brand new paradigm.
Starting with Part 1, the Eastern origins of Western economics. This is where we boldly challenge the standard narrative of where modern economics actually came from. We usually think of modern economics as this purely Western invention, right? Something born strictly out of the European Enlightenment. But the research tells a totally different story. It points to a massive, global exchange of knowledge. Figures like Matteo Ricci, often known as Imadou, essentially led the civilizational deities of the East to spark a massive cultural and intellectual flourishing over in the West. We are talking about the fundamental building blocks of civilization, literally crossing borders and pollinating Western thought centuries ago.
And here is a brilliant example of that cross-pollination. We all know Adam Smith's concept of the invisible hand. It's basically the founding principle of free market capitalism, this idea that unseen forces guide economic outcomes. But scholars have connected this directly back to Eastern religious concepts. They draw a straight line between Smith's invisible hand and Laozi's Tao, which is the natural, unforced flow of the universe. When you really look at it, the invisible hand is in many ways just an echo of the Tao.
And get this, historically, this wasn't some fringe conspiracy theory. The idea of the Chinese origins of Western civilization was actually accepted, common knowledge in Europe right up into the mid-18th century. Brilliant scholars across history, from Zhu Chenzi to John Hobson, have pointed this out over and over. It was only much later that historical distortions popped up, effectively erasing this Eastern philosophical foundation from the Western economic origin story. Understanding this shared global origin is absolutely crucial if we ever want to overcome the cultural identity crises we're facing today.
All right, moving to Part 2, Daesoon economic ethics. Let's zoom in from that broad global history to the specific mechanics of how money and ethics actually interact in Daesoon thought.
In a lot of modern debates, we treat the economy and ethics like they're sworn enemies. We always assume we have to sacrifice profit for ethics or ditch ethics to make a profit, but here they function as a perfectly balanced, mutually interacting relationship. It's exactly like yin-yang, what you might know as yin and yang. Think of them like breathing in and breathing out. They literally rely on each other to exist. You can't have one without the other.
The research categorizes this interaction into four distinct types of economic ethics. You have libertarianism, which covers the individual economic side of things. Then social contractarianism, which is the individual ethical side. Utilitarianism scales things up to the community economic level. And finally, communitarianism handles the community ethical aspect. But the absolutely crucial point here is that these aren't isolated theories sitting in a vacuum. They constantly circulate. Monetary value itself is created through the continuous E. Young-style circulation of these four ethical states.
Which leads us to a massive realization. If you look at it through this lens, a capitalist crisis is essentially just a crisis of circulation caused by the loss of community. This completely reframes our modern economic struggles. It's not a failure of complex algorithms or GDP numbers or central bank policies. It's a fundamental breakdown of human connection and ethical circulation. When our communities fragment, those ethical interactions just stop. And when the ethics stop, the money stops circulating properly, and the whole system crashes.
Part 3, circularity and religion. Let's zoom out again and see how this deep circulation of money weaves right into broader religious logic and the very foundations of society.
Major global thinkers have actually been echoing this for a while. Scholars like Karl Polanyi and Fernand Braudel argued that the economy is essentially a parasitic phenomenon that's entirely grounded in society. Put simply, economics is deeply dependent on us. If the community collapses, the economy is going straight down with it. Marcel Mauss showed us that the gift, an actual act of community and human connection, is vastly more fundamental to building a society than purely self-interested exchange. And from an Eastern religious perspective, Han Taedong's logic shows that major religions exist in a mutually circulatory relationship as well.
This taps right into a vital concept based on the ancient Book of Changes, the economics of the three powers, or Samje, that's heaven, earth, and humanity. In this cyclic worldview, these aren't just abstract mystical buzzwords, they form the actual cosmic bedrock of a highly complex economic view. The economy only operates properly when heaven, earth, and humanity are all circulating together in perfect harmony. But what happens when that harmony is broken? Well, that brings us to one of the most powerful concepts in Daesoon thought, Haewon, or the resolution of grievances. The research frames Haewon as an absolute prerequisite for a truly functional modern economy. That means resolving societal and personal grievances isn't just a nice moral thing to do, it's a critical economic strategy. Think about it. If a workforce feels deeply exploited and resentful, productivity literally crashes. The community fractures. Healing that grievance, actively practicing Haewon, is what restores the flow of a modern society.
Finally, Part 4, Synthesizing the Paradigm. It is time to pull all these distinct research threads together into one grand, unified framework.
So here is the master blueprint for this new paradigm. First, we acknowledge the mutual circulation of knowledge between East and West. History is a shared circulating loop, not a one-way street. Second, we apply that yin-yang connection, permanently linking economy and ethics so they act as two sides of the exact same coin. And third, we structure the whole thing using the three powers of heaven, earth, and humanity. These philosophical puzzle pieces just interlock perfectly.
And this is the absolute light bulb moment. The research reveals how the ancient cosmic structure of the three powers maps flawlessly onto the modern economic life cycle. Heaven, earth, and humanity perfectly mirror production, distribution, and consumption. It's wild, right? The cosmos and the economy are operating on the exact same blueprint of circulation. It is incredibly elegant.
So what's the actual so what here? This isn't just some abstract philosophical theory. It's a proposed practical shift in the modern economic paradigm. By understanding that money is fundamentally just a tool of ethical circulation, we are offered a real, sustainable pathway forward. It gives us a blueprint to overcome our global cultural identity crisis, design a genuinely sustainable economic system, and, most importantly, heal and restore our deeply disconnected communities. I'm going to leave you with a challenge to apply this to the real world. If we actually adopted the Daesoon view today, if we woke up tomorrow and treated money purely as a tool designed for ethical circulation, rather than just a scorecard of who can accumulate the most, how would it completely change our response to today's economic crises? Would we focus a little less on corporate bailouts and a lot more on resolving societal grievances? It's a pretty profound lens to view our future through. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this sparks some deep thinking about what true wealth really looks like in our world.